OIDC or OpenID Connect allows your GitHub Actions workflows to access resources in your cloud provider without having to store any credentials as long-lived GitHub secrets. To use OIDC, you will first need to configure your cloud provider to trust GitHub's OIDC as a federated identity and must then update your workflows to authenticate using tokens. So what you saw just now was adding the necessary prerequisites in the cloud provider, that is AWS. So the first step is to create the provider, that is by adding the provider as you saw in the video. Once the provider is created, then you associate IAM role for the workflow. Assign it certain permissions. For instance, the STS assume credentials identity permissions. So that is the brief about OIDC with AWS, GitHub Actions workflow. The GitHub Actions workflow is very simple. It works on the main branch, on the push event. It has certain Terraform jobs assigned to it. The Terraform jobs are very simple. First step is to configure the AWS credentials action for GitHub Actions. It uses the role to assume, which is the role that we created in the first stage, gives it a random role session name, specifies the AWS region, checks out the GitHub repository, sets up Terraform, initializes the Terraform environment. You may destroy the Terraform stack if it exists already, then creates a plan, gives it a name called new plan, and then applies the Terraform plan. That is the workflow of the GitHub action. The Terraform script is equally simple. It has a Lambda function resource and a data resource to zip the source file, creates a IAM role resource, creates a policy, associates the policy with the role, and then attaches the policy. I had already run a deployment, the workflow that is. It is deployed successfully with 4 Terraform resources getting created in AWS. The Lambda function is created. It has the role that we specified. And since the workflow is triggered on a push, we'll make a dummy change and change the name of the role and the policy associated with it and push the changes again to GitHub. This will cause the push event to be activated and the workflow will get triggered. The GitHub runner that is running the Terraform script, if it encounters any error, then the Terraform apply or the plan or whichever stage that the particular execution of the Terraform script is on, that will get stopped because there is an error in the script. So the error was an additional switch which we can remove and push the changes again to trigger the workflow. STS assume role with web identity in the IDP that was created as the initial step is only responsible for enabling the token handshake. To access other AWS services, those service principals need to be given permissions for OIDC access in the policy attached to the role. The AWS IAM policy best practice recommends assigning only minimum permissions. The usage of IAM full access is just for the purpose of this video, and it is not to be used in real-time usage. The STS policies do not allow for service principals in the policy document, so the permissions need to be attached to the role explicitly. In case of errors in a Terraform deployment, it is always wise to delete any AWS resource that was previously created, like the Lambda in this instance, to avoid needless delays and errors in deployment. The workflow now will run successfully and deploy the Lambda, as now the OIDC workflow has the required IAM create role permission to perform the action, as the IAM permissions are reattached and the role name error rectified. Similarly, if the Lambda permissions are removed from the OIDC role, then the Lambda will fail to deploy due to the lack of permissions for the workflow to execute the Terraform deployment of the Lambda into the Lambda environment. There are many other identity providers in AWS like SAML. Have a look at the stack of Azure SAML integration with AWS IDP. It has the potential for another video, but that is in the far future. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Have a look at my website https://jvravichandran.in. Thank you for watching the video.